Hey, on this episode of Gen X Amplified, this is a very special moment because I am bringing back to the podcast a previous guest for another round of inspiration, conversation, and some Gen exceptional wisdom, because I will be chatting with Schafer. That's right, he's back. But now he is the president and co-founder of Ensemble, which is a branded entertainment studio, also co-founded by actress, producer, and writer, the one and only Issa Rae. And we're going to be talking all about it and more. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
Ultimately, I think that will be AI's equilibrium when it's just baked into things and it just makes everything easier. Maybe not necessarily better at the best end of the spectrum, but definitely better at the worst end of the spectrum. It'll raise the floor.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the show, the platform, the podcast dedicated to giving a voice to the very powerful generation between, as I always like to say, those brilliant boomers and those magnificent millennials. All right, so they say lightning never strikes twice in the same place. But today, that is not the case, as I am welcoming back an amazing repeat guest on the podcast. And my guest is what I call a founder's founder, who is always building something amazing. And right now, currently today is no exception. That's because my guest is the president and co-founder of Ensemble, a next generation branded entertainment studio, which is also co-founded and curated by acclaimed producer, writer, actress, and entrepreneur, Issa Rae. Now, Ensemble collaborates with brands, platforms, and publishers to produce and distribute epic content and activations that shape culture, engage audiences, and move product. And the team at Ensemble is on a passionate mission to make the creator economy more equitable for creators from underrepresented communities. So without further ado, please welcome someone who you may catch at Madison Square Garden passionately cheering the New York Knicks, or at Shea Stadium cheering the New York Mets, or ringing, or should I say rocking the NASDAQ opening bell with my favorite rapper of all time, the GOAT, LL Cool J, my guest, Mr. Schafer. What is going on, man? Welcome back to your dreams.
So great to be back here, Adrian. Thank you for having me.
It is an honor. It is great, Ian, to have you back on. I tell you, and I wasn't playing about my favorite rapper of all time. I tell you, everyone that knows me know that I am a Cool J fanatic, and it was really good to see you doing great work with him as well.
He's the best. He's the best.
Awesome.
I mean, when I talk to him, I'm ready to run through a wall.
I love it.
Pretty amazing.
I love it. So, Ian, as I mentioned in the intro, I've had you on before, and we had a chance to chat. Actually, for those of you who did not get a chance to listen to that episode, it's episode 59, and that was recorded during the pandemic, which is a lot has changed since then. But that is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you back on. So, Ian, as I mentioned in the introduction, you are doing some amazing things. You are building companies, and you're actually having an awesome and amazing new venture to talk about. So, but first, and before we get into that, because it's been a little while and the world has changed a little bit, and businesses have been built and careers have been changed. But can you just, this is all about the journey here on this podcast. I just want you just to take us in the mind of Schafer and just talk about a little bit about the journey from the time that you and I first chat to now your new venture, and just some of the decision making and that path along that journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, at this phase of my life, my career,
yes,
what's left of it is the pursuit of a word that's very popular these days, joy. Right. And so, I feel like the last few years have been me really starting to get a better understanding of what it is that makes me happy professionally. And I think I've learned that being happy professionally means being fulfilled. and fulfilled in a few different ways. Fulfilled just in terms of, I guess there's that sense of appreciation that you want to have, right? Like when you're actually doing something, and that if you experience success, that it's recognized. So that's one thing.
Yes.
Another part is like creative fulfillment. So I've learned, and you know, pandemic time like really messed with my understanding of what it's like to work with people. And I think that it did that for a lot of folks.
Interesting.
I now realize, and I maybe took it for granted in my earlier years in running an ad agency where I was constantly surrounded by creatives and creative energy, and like running through hallways and having the, you know, like stopping a meeting mid-meeting and like, you know, someone like sharing a great idea. Like those kinds of things are a lot harder to come by, either working remotely or being in a role or company where that is just not the most important thing, or that is not the vibe. So I think, you know, one of the conclusions that I drew about myself over the last few years is that I am a creative professional.
Okay.
I enjoy chaos. I enjoy making sense out of chaos.
All right. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And I like creating like original work. And it turns out I actually like creating original work than creating work for others, in the sense that, you know, like my career doing like ad campaigns, marketing campaigns, and those can be fun.
Yes.
But like over the years, I've gotten more involved with, you know, more original forms of storytelling that are made for audiences, not necessarily for brands or sponsors, you know, and I've learned to love that, you know, at a time when it feels like there's not as much work out there for, you know, for traditional Hollywood actors, or writers. And then we had a writer's strike in between all of this, right? Like all of these things led to like kind of an appreciation for all of that. And I'm finding that with this new evolution of, we'll call it the creator economy, I would just say it's an evolution of the entertainment industry, that there is more opportunity to create things that audiences love now than there ever has been. It's just that the economics are completely different. And so I like that challenge of figuring out like what should the future of entertainment look like, which is why I consider myself blessed, lucky, all of the things to be working with somebody who's as obsessed with trying to figure that out as Issa. Yeah,
let's talk about that a little bit more. So, well, thank you first, Ian, to walking us through that journey, because again, as I mentioned, when we last spoke in 2020, those of you who listened to the episode, I think it was literally before the world just totally shut down. You and I were having a conversation about Kindred, and at the time it was a live event, but you were transitioning accordingly, and then the world changed. And I know you've done some amazing things since then, and Kindred is going to do some great things. But, well, let's go deeper into that, because you mentioned the moment of self-reflection, right? Where this is what this show is about. Broader sense, you know, my platform, Mid-Career Mastery, my focus on kind of that middle years where a lot of us are going through those inflection points. And we have all those years behind us that we've done great things and we have all the experiences and the skills. But there comes a moment where we go deeper inward and we start to try to identify what is a meaningful career path. And you spoke about that. Can you just talk about now finding someone, a partner, an impact? What was that like? And just kind of just talk about just the aha moment when you made the decision to partner this new venture. Just kind of take us into that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is fueled by something that I've always felt, is that creative industries are inherently exploitative. The supply chain within creative industries is filled with like disproportionate leverage.
Okay.
And it's why we have like the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild, right? And the Producers Guild, which I'm a proud member of. So like that is like, to me, like that is something that I've always been aware of, including like even in running an ad agency and realizing that there's a lot of nepotism in that industry. There is a lot of fear of being uncomfortable or fear of taking risks, which is ironic considering like that's the fuel of creative is risk taking. But again, like the industry has just moved away from that. And that includes who you hire. So one of the things that I'm really proud of, just in terms of building the agency Deep Focus, was that we hired, I guess maybe what other people might call misfits. right? Like including people who like didn't have high school degrees, much less college degrees.
Okay.
People who came from improv or comedy writing and not necessarily, the Rhode Island School of Design. We had those too.
Right.
But it's like when you kind of are constantly fishing in the same little tiny lake, you catch all of the same fish, and half the time it's fish that people threw back.
Right.
So for me, like I really like wanted to get outside of the comfort zone, or at least the industry's comfort zone, and bring in what I felt were the most unexpected heroes, but became heroes nonetheless. That's something that I took with me like over the years. By the way, like also as like kind of just like a student of like film, cinema, music, things like that. Those industries have been incredibly exploitive, especially the music industry, right? There have been like lots of trials and tribulations with that.
Yes.
And so, with Kindred, a big part of me was trying to fix a lot of that inequity as best as I can, starting with the people who are making all of the decisions. I just felt like it was time for accountability. And if we wait for companies to make decisions, we'll be waiting forever. If we hold people to the fire, individuals to the fire to make decisions, a lot more pressure, a lot more urgency to act. Right. So that's what we did there. With what's happening now, I looked at in kind of figuring out what I wanted to do next. And, in between, like I, built a media and production company with a basketball player.
That's right.
So, but in trying to figure this all out, I looked at the where's the chaos, and didn't have to look much farther than the entertainment industry itself, but also the creator economy.
Okay.
And like, excuse me, like everyone, it's a very popular thing to talk about, right? Yes. It's just like AI is a popular thing to talk about, and like all these other things are. It's funny, like the creator economy has evolved. It evolved from like a lot of attention being paid to the startups in it, who are raising a lot of money for it, and not necessarily getting like the exits that they were looking for, because I think people realize that while the appeal is that in the creator economy is that the tail is so long,
right?
It doesn't necessarily equate to monetization, like the further away you get from the fatter part of the tail.
That's a great point.
So for me, I was like, all right, so if we looked at the creator economy, who were the people that made it? That set the precedent, for people wanting to make things for audiences, distribute them directly to audiences, and expand their careers and brands horizontally rather than waiting for like the invitation to join a writer's room somewhere, things like that. If you just look at like I'm blessed to have one teenager and two preteens who are obviously consuming a lot of content on their devices.
Same here.
I as a 40-something-year-old still have to pay close attention to culture.
Yes.
And just saw that, under the age of 35, you have a completely different definition of, I would say it's like celebrity.
Okay.
Or what you watch. And I think if you asked someone over the age of 35, what are you watching? It's a show. And if you were to ask that to someone under the age of 35, it would be a person. That's a good point. Yes. And that is a very, very, very important difference and distinction, because again, it changes the entire economic model. So, in a world where, people are tuning into people, brands are going to play a much bigger role in all of that in terms of, creating the next generation of content that people are going to see. And therein lied the opportunity for me. So I, was blessed to be introduced to Issa and the HOORAE team. Issa was making Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl on YouTube.
Yes, I remember that.
Back when I was building the agency. And then a few years after that, she wound up making Insecure for HBO, which my agency also worked on.
Which is where you and I met when I worked at HBO and you were at Deep Focus. That's right.
That's right. See, so it's like, this is the kind of thing where I'm like, all right, so that was one path. And by the way, Issa's also done the horizontal thing. She has Via Ray, a Prosecco. She has Sienna Naturals, a line of hair care products. She has Hilltop Coffee. I mean, she is a multi-hyphenate. And I'm obsessed with people who crush it as multi-hyphenates, because I just think that they're so scarce. And there aren't many people who can excel at that, because you have to have like a savvy business mind. You have to have a savvy creative mind. It's that left and right brain balance that I just think is super rare. She's got it.
Yes.
And when I was given the opportunity, I took it right away, right? Like this is, an all-time great, a hero, and I couldn't be more excited to meet her. And I did. And clearly our heads are in the same place about like solving problems, right? Including the people that I'm working with now at Ensemble, including the people that I'm working with HOORAE. Issa's talked a lot in the past about like changing the decision-making process in Hollywood to ensure that the people that audiences want to see are getting the opportunities. I think that is representation in the creator economy is different, right? Because everyone can get on camera.
Right.
So it's not about like making the decisions behind the cameras to say who's going to be there. But there are decisions that brands make. There are decisions that machines make that make it harder to be on at some level of parity if the merit dictates it and certainly the compensation doesn't, right? And so that's a problem. And then there's the problem of people creating content on these platforms that they're effectively giving away. So you develop like a successful show,
right,
like on TikTok or a series of content on TikTok. Do you really own it? Right? Is that the kind of thing you could take with you and go somewhere else? Because someone can just like copy it right away. In fact, that's like half the beauty of TikTok is copying things and remixing it, right? And almost like paying no attention to the IP, let TikTok deal with that, like with the record labels on the back end.
Yes.
But it's chaos, but it's also beautiful because there's so much more talent that doesn't have to wait to get discovered. Because that's where the nepotism comes in. That's when the introductions, that's when the who you know comes in. And we really can have a meritocratic, discovery process for content, which means like maybe we're entering into another golden age of it. And maybe it's a golden age of it quality wise,
right?
But the economics are going to be completely different. And so it's like, how do we make that work for everybody is the question.
Well, thank you, Ian. I mean, thank you for unpacking that mission even more, because one of the things that I noticed when I saw the announcement and saw the venture and who you were partnering with, who I'm a fan, just obviously you're not just being a former HBO person, but just a great storyteller. But for you to explain not just the, the flash of the creator economy, but you talked about, which I want to unpack even more, some of the challenges of monetizations and how Ensemble is primed to help augment some of the barricades when it comes to algorithms, right, or underrepresentation. Can you just talk about a little bit more just the thinking in of how you all at your team at Ensemble can help fill that void, considering that there's so much clutter out there, there's so much content, there's so many individuals who want to be influencers, but they're not thinking the way you just laid it out. Yes, I can create content, but am I monetizing it? Do I own it? Do I have the opportunities? Just kind of talk about some of the strategies behind what you all are doing and the problem that you're solving. Yeah.
I mean, I think I would think of us less as an influencer or a creator company.
Okay.
And think about us more as an entertainment company.
That's great.
Because there is a difference. There is a difference between people who make content, like Get Ready With Me content, for example, for like beauty products. That is entertainment, but it's in service of like product discovery.
Got it.
And that's very different than someone who's doing like these brilliant comedy skits on a platform, or, doing these like breakthrough like interview shows and like kind of new formats and experimenting with those online. And so what we've decided to do was take a curative approach to it.
Okay.
Everyone's creative. Everyone has creativity. Not everyone is necessarily really great at it. So what we've decided to do was start curating, people who we feel objectively, or subjectively, depending on the situation, are doing it better than most, right? Have potential to take the thing that they're doing today and do it at another level. That level doesn't necessarily have to be in TV or film or streaming.
Okay.
It could still be digital, but it just could be like bigger, broader formats. You can make plenty of money with a podcast. They're like, people are getting $100 million deals for podcasts, and I'm not saying those are going to be falling from trees.
I need to talk to you then, because I'm not one of those people. But
no, I hope so. Well, let's see what we could do. But that is the thing, and so again, it's like that level of engagement, relevance is still scarce, which means it does still need to be curated. Like someone does need to have an eye. And Issa has built a reputation in Hollywood as being better at curation than most. And whether that's curation of talent for a show,
right?
Whether that's curation of a soundtrack, for like Insecure or rap shit, right? Which crushed it, right? Like the amount of new music that people discover from the soundtracks of those shows is unbelievable.
It's amazing. No, I love it. Yeah.
And like, that is the essence of what it is that we're doing. It's that, we're not managing or representing talent, because then you are on the hook to deliver a steady flow of revenue to your clients.
Okay. And
if you don't, they might choose to move on and go somewhere else. What we're doing is creating bigger, better opportunities for that talent to collaborate with brands over a longer period of time. So what we would say is that the creators who are part of Ensemble are brands unto themselves. And we think there is a great match between the brand of Pepsi, for example, and the brand of this particular creator. And what would a collaboration between those brands do? Because clearly Pepsi makes soda.
Yes.
They are also have an incredible heritage of creating culture, right?
Oh, tremendous.
So we're contributing to it.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael Jackson's, when I think about creating culture and stepping into that ecosystem, I mean, obviously, and I'm a Gen Xer, so I remember those days.
Michael Jackson, Britney Spears,
exactly.
Michael J. Fox.
We can go on and on and on.
Like, goes on, right? Beyonce in the Super Bowl halftime show, right? Like,
that is right.
So, those are all things that make sense. And then if you pair that brand up with the right brand of creator, the content that can come out of that, the ideas that can come out of that over the course of months, if not years, could be really something special. And I think like creators should be going through things that feel more like ambassadorships and, kind of residency programs with brands,
right? Rather
than a more transactional, hey, can we buy 3 videos from you? Right. They may be media companies, like, because they make and sell access to their content.
Right.
But they're people and they are cultural touch points that I think deserve the respect of collaboration, not necessarily transaction. So, or just transaction. So that is like certainly like a core tenet of everything that we do is, respecting, our clients, of course, but also respecting, the brands that these creators have built and understanding if it's something that they would never do, we should take their word for it because it's something that their audiences wouldn't like. And they know their audience is better than anyone else. I mean, Issa's, for example, has been on the record saying that, yes, like when she was making Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, damn right she'd read the comments. Everyone tells you not to. Right. But like you do. And sometimes there's interesting feedback in there and you take it. I'm not saying focus group every piece of content, but again, like you figure things out and then you take your risks, in adjacent efforts. And that's what we're also here to empower is to give more opportunities for these creators to have like adjacent efforts. Like, great, you're doing these like skits that are working really well on like TikTok in 15-second like increments. Maybe there's a show in you. Maybe there's an animated series in you. Maybe there's a product in you, that your audience might fall in love with, or it could be a collaboration with, a particular brand. Those are the kinds of opportunities that we're trying to make more of. So don't be surprised, we've already had a lot of collaborative work between brands and creators in market. But don't be surprised when you see us launching, original shows and series featuring a lot of this talent that they own a piece of, which is very important. When you talk about equity, it's not just about like kind of the equitability of the industry. It's also about owning more of your ideas, of more of your work, so that when your work succeeds, you succeed with it, as opposed to just making somebody else money. And I think that's like when you talk about like wealth creation and what's necessary for, a generation to be better than the one that came before it.
Right.
I think that is what we're talking. It's ownership. It's equity. It's why like we've talked about in America, like the importance of home ownership.
Right.
Well, if you're an artist, it's the importance of equity in your work. And again, like this is what the record industry, like, really had to come to grips with over the years and probably, still hasn't really done it, but, I'm committed to figuring out how to do it, with these incredible young and sometimes older, creators who are probably leaving another career behind to do this.
Wow. Well, that's a great transition, and that I wanted to talk about more is some of the demographic breakdowns of individuals. Because when I think about the creator economy, obviously, it exploded from my purview during the pandemic because people were at home. They were looking for creative ways to not only entertain themselves, but to monetize. And you saw just this uptick of whether it was podcast created, videos, TikTok. And to me, it hasn't subsided, but there's just been more opportunities. But to your point, there's a friction between I can create, but am I creating value, not just for the audience, but for myself? But let's talk about, you mentioned younger and older. And I was looking at a study recently, what percentage of individuals are considered creators? And a lot of times people tend to think that it's heavily skewed to the Gen Zs and now the Gen Alphas, which I have a Gen Alpha daughter who's 9 now. And she's like, Daddy, every day I want to have my own YouTube channel. I'm like, okay. But that's what that's their world, right?
Yeah.
But obviously a lot of individuals think that these creators are skewing much younger, which they possibly are. But I've witnessed many people in our generation or even older that are looking to do something different, to have supplementary income. And I think there's a study, MBO partner study, that illustrated breakdowns per generation of the creator economy. And it stated that millennials contribute about 39% of creators, Gen Xers 24%, Gen Z 26%, and boomers 11%. But that Gen X 24%, millennials 39%, which millennials now are, some of them are 40%. Can you just talk a little bit about the opportunities and also kind of what you've seen for individuals and maybe some of the opportunities that they may not be taking advantage of in this creator economy for people in their middle years and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see a lot of great creators who were formerly doing something else.
Yes.
Like leaving, and I talk about like leaving careers to do it because they were doing both at the same time.
Got it.
And we're faced with a choice. It's like, I feel like I can do something great here with my like TikTok and Instagram content if I could only spend more time doing it. And that becomes, from an income standpoint, a really big decision. And when you talk about kind of starting a company,
right,
and like taking that like entrepreneurial risk, it is not for everybody. Like, hey man, I don't even know if it's for me, but I just keep doing it because I don't think anyone would hire me. So, that it takes a lot of like, you almost have to be like averse to motion sickness to do it, right? Like you just can't, like, it can't be something that rattles you. It has to be something that motivates you.
Exactly.
And I think like for individuals who are taking that leap, they're every bit the entrepreneur that someone who's building a company is.
Okay.
And when you talk about like a founder mentality, it's like the whole, like, I know like Facebook made this a thing with like move fast and break things like back in the day, but like it is try. Right. It's like, you're never going to get it perfect if it's not out there and you're not getting like tactile feedback. Well, that's what creators are doing every day.
Right.
Like they're publishing content, they're getting feedback, and they're using that feedback to make the next thing that they do better. So they're shipping. So it's like when you compare it to like an engineering led organization, these creators are probably shipping faster than they are. So, they see that, and it is exciting. And I have to say, like the endorphin rush that you get from a piece of content that you hoped might work when it does, or the content that you're like, nah, that'll never work, and it does. Right. Like that endorphin rush is huge, but you have to like be able to reconcile the fact that does the endorphin rush turn into an endorsement rush? And does that, like, is it going to give me enough leeway to like leave the maybe more reliable job of, say, being like a registered nurse and go do this content thing full time? And that's a kind of a scary like proposition for anybody, as anyone would be like sitting in their job and saying, why am I doing this for somebody else when I could be doing it for myself? Because a lot of people have those thoughts. Right. And like sometimes they go out and do a consulting thing, which, yes, is also like very entrepreneurial in a different way, but it is. So like, it's interesting when I talk to all of these creators, the ones who are like much younger and have been doing it probably since they were in their dorm rooms, have a very different mentality than the ones who had careers, much less jobs, and then found this as a next phase of their career or an evolution of who they are personally. And that kind of like personal, that journey of personal discovery is absolutely fascinating. Like those are my favorite stories. When I hear like somebody like there's a creator that we do a lot of work with, for example, who used to be, a camera person at a local news outlet on the West Coast. And like, he spent all this time behind the camera, and it was like, I could do that. And like most of the time, when you're thinking about your career, it's like, if you wanted to do something and someone would ask, well, have you done it before? And like, no, that's why I'm interviewing for this job.
Yes.
With when it comes to like content creation, like you can just go do it. You just do it.
Right.
And he was amazing at it. And now it's his career, and he's borderline like kind of like household name for, again, people under a certain age. So like that is the kind of thing where, it's wonderful to see. Like I love seeing that kind of like, professional, but also personal evolution, because it changes your perspective entirely. And that perspective is different when you have kids, because there's a greater sense of like responsibility, which makes, kind of taking risks that much more difficult. But at the end of the day, you look back and, I've seen a lot of people in, for example, in like the world of venture capital, talking recently about the fact that so many and more founders that they're meeting and funding than ever are over 40.
That is true. Yeah.
They've seen some shit, and they know how to adapt, and they know how to react, and like they know how to like, avoid the riskiest of risks,
right.
And how to maximize upside. And so, it's just the kind of thing where it's like, yes, there's a certain amount of like naivete, like for example, that I had when I was starting like Deep Focus at 26. I was like
5 years ago. It was 5 years ago, right?
Of course I can do this. Anyone can do whatever. Right. I'm better than everybody else. And then the reality of starting a company at 48,
right,
is like it's a very different mentality.
Yes.
But I think I'm happier now. I used to fear the phone ringing when I was running the agency, because it was whenever, I don't know about you, but anytime anyone calls me now, it's usually not good news. I know. So it's like, now I like, like I love getting on the phone, I like talking to people. It's just a completely different perspective and mentality that I think, age prepares you well for.
Oh, it does. You're singing to my ears. And I just posted something recently on LinkedIn a few days ago about some of the data that, for example, some of the facts that the average age of successful startup founders now is 45. And nearly 70% of middle-aged founders are married with kids. And so that's just been some of the trend lines. But a lot of times people just think founder and they think Mark Zuckerberg in a hoodie, running through the halls of Harvard, and that's one persona. But a lot of individuals now, we have the experience, we have the skills, but they're at this inflection point where they're thinking about, how can I help fuel that passion inside of me? How can I really feed the purpose system inside of me and find meaning? And maybe these tools are part of that. For me, example, we're sitting here chatting over Gen X Amplified, and this was born out of my own pain point. In my mid-40s, when I was trying to figure out, going through my own malaise and noticing that other individuals and colleagues in our age cohort were going through this kind of self-questioning and, is this it? Am I really living out my purpose? And is this what I want to do? And I'm like, wait a minute, this is a real thing. So I wanted to amplify the virtues of people that are kind of my age range. And then from that, it spawned onto other things with mid-career mastery. But again, it's that same story you just talked about. And so I'm creating, and for not only my own personal enjoyment, but I'm trying to create an impact and leave something, that I own. And so that story is so fascinating. So you mentioned the two letters that is often repeated so often nowadays, A and I, earlier in our conversation. So I'm just curious, just from your purview, as you all at your team and Ensemble are focusing on creator economy entertainment, the impact of AI with respect to creation. Just kind of get your purview, your thoughts on the impact of the technology. And we're in the infancy stage, but how does it impact creators or incentivize creators to go to speed of market possibly faster? Or does it inhibit, does it augment? Just would love your take on that.
Well, I think any technology thrives in two ways. One is when it's used as a tool, right, to improve the output of human thinking, which I don't care how much money you pour into technology and machines, you will never recreate the chaos of synapses firing inside the human brain, right? It is just like, there's just amazing things that will come out of people, and horrible things that will come out of people that again, like you can't optimize to. right? It kind of just happens. It's like, space time, like kind of, aligning in a particular moment to make something amazing. And I just don't think like machines will ever be capable of being as creative as humans. They may be able to create new things faster.
Okay.
But that's different. That is manufacturing as opposed to creativity.
That's a great point.
To that extent, I think everyone's dabbling in it, whether they know it or not. And I think, the second thing that makes technology great is when it becomes invisible. And right now it's in its very visible stage because everyone's trying to raise money and everyone's trying to make money. Right. And everyone's trying to say, oh, we've got this AI thing to make their stock price jump. So this is definitely the hype cycle phase of it. And I think it means like everything gets taken very literally.
Okay.
It's usually like 3 or so years after the hype cycle is over where it's kind of baked into everything. And then you're like, oh, like I get it now.
Yes.
So I think ultimately, that will be AI's equilibrium is when it's like just baked into things and it just makes everything easier and quicker. Maybe not necessarily better at the best end of the spectrum, but definitely better at the worst end of the spectrum. It'll raise the floor.
Interesting.
And I think I'm seeing it in animation, in speeding up, the amount of time, like, for example, to create frames and do tweening and things like that to bring things to life. Mm-hmm. I think it's helping in terms of, it's not exactly AI, even though there's some elements that will be in there, like AR lenses and things like that can enhance creativity.
Yes.
I think there are certainly like people are going to use large language models to like help them when they get stuck.
Right.
But the other side of that coin is monoculture.
Okay.
So like if everyone is using the same inputs, how likely are you to get to different outputs?
That's great.
And I think like this AI is getting trained on a lot of things, primarily on the things that people are granting them rights to. So it's like, that's great that Condé Nast licensed all its content to ChatGPT, I guess, if it's going to keep them making stuff, or OpenAI rather, right? But is everything going to be written with the snark of Vanity Fair? You know what I mean? I think all of that, like you could train all of these models all you want, but I just don't know if the second that you rely on it for something, it becomes a crutch and probably is going to make whatever comes out of it worse. At the end of the day.
That's a great.
So it's like my fear for what AI does, it makes everything look similar.
Yes.
Makes everything sound similar, as opposed to the other, like the different kind of monoculture that I like when it's like, it feels like everybody's watching the same thing. Like it feels like there's like a moment in time where we're all united as a species, as a civilization. It's why I love this Olympics.
Yes. Oh.
It's why I love the World Cup.
Right.
Right. It's like, these are moments when it feels like the entire Eurovision, I guess, to a certain degree, right? Like it's when it feels like the world is all watching.
Yes.
We're all experiencing like humanity together.
Yes.
Even if it's not necessarily the case, if it feels like that,
right,
I feel like we feel more connected to each other. Instead, what's happened is that we've all gotten every one of our social media feeds is now our own, like we've trained effectively our own individual AIs to only show us certain kinds of content.
That is true.
So it almost doesn't feel like any of us are watching or experiencing the same thing anymore. And I think that's part of what's driven us further apart. It's why, like, even though I don't even think the Haktua thing is remotely funny, at least it's something that we all can, know. Like, it's almost like nice to like have something that weirdly everyone knows about.
Yeah, I stumbled on that, and at first I kept seeing the hashtags. I'm like, what is this? And when I clicked, and did I actually just see what I just saw? And
right, you're like, is
this a phenomenon? This is actually a phenomenon right now.
It's not really. It's just manufactured, and like again, like part of this is like this goes back to the danger of the monoculture thing. Like it's nice for a second, but then when you have like, your mom's favorite brand hashtagging that in a post to get traction, then you're like, no.
It's gone too far.
I don't like this at all.
It's gone too far. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and this is great. And I'm glad I asked you that question because when it comes to new technology, large language models, considering your career path, I mean, you've been through it all, Web 1.0, 2.0, with respect to entertainment in your beginning of Disney and Miramax. And so you've seen the evolution of technology, but you've also embraced the purity of human creativity, and it's good to hear you say that will always prevail, if we do it right, if we approach it right. And I think that's what the genius and the freshness of what Ensemble is primed to do. Before I let you go, because I always, and this is part 2, so what I'm about to ask you. Yeah. So Ian, so if there was another song that would play anytime now you walk down the street with your new Ensemble merch on, I would say, and your new job that perfectly reflects you and the brand of Ian Schafer, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song now?
I think it'd be, because I'm looking at them on my screen right now, it would be Tribe Called Quest's Electric Relaxation.
Can I just say, honestly, for some reason I knew, because I know you're a Tribe fan. I know you're a Tribe fan. I was like, is he going to pick a Tribe song? Because you went, old school Commodores last time. Yeah. I said, he's going to come with, you did. That was your song last time. Easy listening, but huge Q. And speaking of Q-Tip, I told you, Cool J. We can go on and on about the new Q-Tip produced LL Cool J album, which is amazing.
It's fantastic,
and I keep playing it, and and I'm not to interrupt you, but I'm loving the Gary Newman sample on I go deep. So yeah, but anyway, yeah, Q-Tip is, you can't ever go wrong. So Tribe Called Quest, love the song. And why did you pick that song today? I'm just curious.
I just think as I've gotten older, and I was always into it somewhat, but as I've gotten older, I've even had a greater appreciation for jazz, because so much of it is improvisation, right? Right.
Yes, true.
And I think no one brought jazz to hip hop and to funk like Tribe did, in my opinion. And I think that just the notion of being able to find some level of, it's hard to relax these days,
right?
So just find being okay with things like not always being figured out,
right?
Or even being okay is probably the secret to being happy, to being successful. Because again, it's there are things going to be that are happening all day that are going to make you unhappy. So, but when you look back and you reflect in your station in life or where you are you happy? I'm starting to ask people that question more and more,
right?
Because I'm genuinely curious. You don't always get the answer that you're looking for either, and so I just think that song to me is a song that makes me happy. Mm-hmm. It's a song that does calm me down. If I need to, if I'm all wound up, I'll throw that song on and it'll mellow me out. But I also I love Tribe, and so that is just when I think of them, that's often the song that pops right into my mind because of its mellowness.
I love it. Did you see the Beats Rhymes of Life documentary? I'm just kidding.
Of course.
All right. I love it. It's a great documentary. I knew you would.
RIP 5.
And this has been great. As always, thank you so much for coming back on. Please let the Gen X Amplified audience know more about how they can keep in touch with the greatness and all the great things that you and your team and Ensemble are doing, and what you're doing personally as well.
Yeah, sure. So you can follow me at Schafer, ISCHAFER, on every social media platform. You can follow Ensemble at Follow Ensemble on every platform, and at theensemble.co. Okay. If you like websites, if that's your thing. And there's a newsletter sign up. We'll be making good use of that very soon. But I would say definitely follow us. Certainly on LinkedIn would be great, because that's where we're going to be sharing a lot of the updates we're going to be doing. We're coming up on, December will be our kind of first year wrap up. And so we're going to be, publishing a kind of compendium of the work that we've done, but also holding ourselves accountable for what we've done for equity in the economy too. So I'm looking forward to publishing that at the end of the year as well.
Wow. What I'm looking forward to reading it and following your journey. And thank you so much. It is an honor. It is great. I'm always excited about seeing what you're building next because I know it's always going to be something. And I'm very encouraged and inspired by this new partnership. Thank you for spending time with me and our Gen X Amplified audience.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, there it is. There it is. Another conversation, another round with my friend, Mr. Ian Schafer. It is always so much fun having him back on Gen X Amplified, and he's always doing something new. And that's why when he launched and announced the launch, I should say, of Ensemble and his new partnership with Issa Rae, I reached out and said, Ian, you got to get back on the pod so we can unpack all of this greatness, your plans with Ensemble, and all the other things that you've been doing and will be doing in the future. So everyone, make sure, as Ian stated, you follow Ensemble, follow everything that they're doing. Make sure that you follow them on LinkedIn, as he stated, and follow Ian along his career journey and his mid-career mastery. And as always, thank you so much for listening and subscribing to Gen X Amplified, the podcast dedicated to the powerful generation between those brilliant boomers and those magnificent millennials. Make sure you also check out and follow me at adrianporter.com for more episodes and all the things that we're doing with Mid-Career Mastery. Remember, this is more than a brand, it's more than a podcast, it's more than a company. This is a movement. Thank you again. Take care.